Welcome to Career and Leadership Real Talk, the no-nonsense guide for ambitious managers who want to have more impact and progress their career. I'm Pamela Langan, a job search coach and expert CV writer specialising in helping frustrated professionals land the jobs and pay rises they know they deserve.
And I'm Jackie Jagger, a leadership and mindset coach specialising in helping newly promoted and new to role leaders to avoid the dickhead trap and lead with confidence. Between us, we've helped hundreds of leaders and managers to find new roles, take ownership of their careers, and handle the challenges that job searches and leadership responsibility inevitably bring. And now we're joining forces to share with you what we know has worked for our clients.
Hello and welcome to this week's episode. This is an exciting one for us because for only the second time, we have a guest expert with us. So we're going to be covering the topic of how you can stand out as a leader by being someone who can develop others. And to talk about what is a crucial topic, and frankly, it's a little bit rude that we've taken 2 years to get around to this, we have Katy Walton with us. Katy, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having us. And I've been so excited. I can't wait to get going with this one.
Yeah, I have a feeling this is one that could be in multiple parts. So we'll keep it concise for today. But before we get started, introduce yourself, tell our listeners a little bit about you and how this is a topic that you're so passionate about.
All right, first thing, I've got to out myself as having been in a learning and development role for 30 years. And I know I don't look quite old enough, but learning and development is an absolute passion of mine. And in short, I help people leaders to grow their impact, grow their people, and grow their leadership skills. And so I'm all about development, and it's something that I probably could talk about for hours. So I will limit myself and I will be succinct and to the point today.
Yeah, and Katy and I first came across each other a few years ago now online. And it was when Katy was asking for, I don't know if you remember this, Katy, but you were asking for guest experts for the group that you ran for L&D professionals. And I was like, I can't talk about any of those topics, but they sound right up my street. So am I allowed to join the group, even though I'm not in-house anymore? And very kindly, you did let me. And that group was just an amazing resource, and getting to know you through it has been fabulous. So I know the value that you will bring. So Katy, I describe Katy as the L&D person that I want to be when I grow up. So her knowledge is second to none. Her approach is incredible. And I know that this is going to be an amazing value episode for those of you who want to improve your ability to develop others. Kick us off then, Katy, by talking about some of the benefits that come when a leader is able to develop others. What is the immediate benefit that someone's going to see if they invest their energy in getting better at this?
I think, first of all, it's vitally important to focus on engagement, because we all know that when people who work with us and work for us are more engaged, they're much more likely to be productive and perform better. And there are so many studies out there, primarily let's focus on Gallup, where they talk about the fact that when people are focused on development, when they are able to see their progress, when they focus on their strengths, when people are interested in developing them and helping them in career, they are so much more likely to be engaged. And I guess the follow-on short-term benefit to that is the uplift in performance that you're likely to see. Because let's face it, when you've got people in your team who are skilled, who are competent, who are confident, they're much more likely to perform at their best. And so you think there's an immediate benefit for you in having a team that are performing well. There's an immediate benefit for you in having a team who are motivated and want to be at work and are enjoying what they do. And also there's an immediate benefit to your reputation, because if people around you see you as a leader who's investing in their team, A, people want to work with you and for you, and B, it boosts your reputation across the business. So if you are looking to progress in your career, maybe move further up the ladder, then what you might find is that people seek you out, because being able to develop others well, being focused on your team in that way, it pays dividends to your reputation. It makes a massive difference in how you're perceived across the business.
You know, I absolutely love that, because during my own career, that was one of the things that I really focused on. And it was about getting that engagement from the team. And I didn't even mean to go down the route of creating a reputation or anything like that, but I become known as somebody who would develop people. So people wanted to come into my team. And it's funny hearing you talk through that, because I never actually, at the time when I think about it, realized what I was doing. It was just part of me and how I started my management leadership career. I just thought, if I bring the people with me, it's going to be easier. But some people find it really difficult, don't they, to do that and communicate with the team. So what would you say if people are listening and they're thinking, this is something that I would love to do, I'd love to get my team engaged? Like, where can they start with that?
Oh, do you know what? I'm a massive fan in starting really simple and think about the most simple things that you can do. So, for example, a lot of the leaders that I work with, they are fixers, they are problem solvers. They want to solve things, or they think they have to solve things by themselves. So sometimes it could be as simple as, instead of trying to fix or solve a problem, asking your team. So this is the beginning journey to be more coach-like as a leader, right? But just asking the team, what do you think? What's your opinion? And going with a question first before trying to fix it. That's a brilliant way. It doesn't take you any extra time. It's something that you can weave into pretty much any conversation. So if you don't know what to do, maybe start off with asking some questions like that, and also getting to know your team a little bit more. So if you're having monthly one-to-ones, instead of being really focused on task updates and how people are progressing against their goals, maybe take a little bit of time to ask a few more questions to find out a little bit more about them. What's important to you in your career? Which is a really different question from where do you want to be in 5 to 10 years' time? Or finding out what are the things that light them up at work, what energizes them, and also sort of talking about their strengths. What do they really do well? Because when we're talking about development, it doesn't have to be just on what they're not doing and where they have to improve. Going back to Gallup, there's masses of research out there that also talks about when you do something that you're great at. So when you build on your strengths, and when you can do that regularly, preferably every day, it makes a huge difference to engagement and motivation as well. But yeah, going back to your point, just start small. That's my biggest advice. Just think about, can I ask a question instead of giving some advice or solving something for somebody?
Yeah, that's brilliant, because it is just start really small and keep it really simple, isn't it? And build on it. And I suppose it's almost not being afraid to have those conversations with your team as well and find out more about them. It's not just about like their personal lives. It's like you say, what makes them tick. And it does really make a difference, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And it sounds like it's something that you probably did instinctively when you were saying that it was almost like a byproduct that you were getting the engagement and motivation. So I'm guessing you probably did exactly those kinds of things, right? Ask those questions, be interested in other people.
Yeah, I think, and it's funny that you say that, because for me, it was always about how can I help these people progress? Because I was so ambitious in my career and I wanted leaders and managers that would support me in my career. So I wanted to do the same for others. And I thought, if I help other people, then other people will help me as I progress through my career. And it did actually work out quite well. And a lot of the people that I help progress in their early days, I'm still in touch with and still come and work with me every few years when they're ready for that next promotion. So it does, when you think about your team as how can I help them progress in their career, rather than thinking, don't want to help them to develop because what if they leave? It's like, how can I help them to advance their careers too? So it's not just like what's in it for me and driving the business forward. It's about that real kind of thinking of the person as well.
I think you're absolutely spot on with that. And there's an activity that I do quite often in leadership development programs, which is getting people to think about the best manager they ever worked for. And I can't tell you, every single time we have that kind of conversation, there is always a reference to the best manager I ever worked for developed me. They inspired me. They helped me to grow. They helped me to do more than I thought I was capable of. They built my confidence. So it's amazing. Some of these people go back like 20, 30 years thinking about this one conversation that their manager had that kind of lit their spark. And the best managers, they're doing this quite consistently. And to your point, Pam, often it's not because there's something in it for them. That's the nice byproduct. it's because they've got this feel that by investing in other people, it's going to help them in their career. So when you're shifting from being more focused on yourself to more focused on other people, you just get all these amazing things that happen as a result, by like a happy byproduct.
So I honestly, there's so many strands that I could pull from all of the stuff that you've just shared, but I want to go back to something that you said quite early on when you were talking there, of this thing around the pressure on managers to have the answer and to be a fixer. Because I see this a lot where that can be a real barrier to people developing others, because they feel like it's part of their role to be the most knowledgeable one, to have the answers. And it feels like I'm not doing my job properly if I'm asking my team to give their own answers. So I see that a lot from that side that can get in the way. And it's something that I've quite often challenged leaders and managers on when we've been running development sessions of, okay, but how do you grow when they recognize those things of being challenged, of being given opportunities that are maybe slightly outside of their comfort zone, or being asked to come up with ideas. And then you can see the penny drop of, oh, actually, I'm not necessarily helping them when I give all the answers. And maybe that isn't always my role. So what are some of the other barriers that you see? Because that exercise of getting people to think about who's the best manager they've ever had really pinpoints some of the things that people want and need from a manager. What are the things that get in the way of managers being like that more consistently?
Okay, there's quite a few, but one of the most common ones that comes up is I don't have time. Because let's face it, everybody is having to do more and more with less and less hours. There's more and more pressure. So that, I think that's probably the number one barrier that people come up with. I don't have time to develop my team. I don't have time because I've got so much on my plate. So I guess that links back to what I was saying earlier about thinking about taking it one step at a time, because it really doesn't take much more time at all to ask a question rather than give an answer. So it might take, I don't know, 30 seconds more, a minute more maybe, but it really doesn't have to take a huge amount of time. Thinking about how you can weave in development on an ongoing basis. So I've got one manager who I remember really clearly, and this was probably about 20 years ago. So I'd been delivering training as part of my role for some time, but I needed to shift into more of a learning and development business partner. And I didn't know what I didn't know about it. And so one of the things that he started to do was blind copy me into some of the emails. So when he was consulting with directors in the business, he would then blind copy me into the emails so I could see the tone that he used. I could see the questions that he was asking. So that literally took him no extra time at all. And I learned so much through that. I learned about the questions that the directors were going to be asking. I learned about how he was responding to difficult situations and difficult challenges. And what that meant was when we got together for our one-to-ones, he would then ask me, so what have you learned from those? And what are you going to be taking on board? And what might you be doing differently? And it was absolute gold dust. And it's a great example of how things don't need to take a huge amount of time at all.
I think that's a brilliant way, isn't it? Because it's also showing that level of trust in you. So you build that relationship with that manager. But I do think as well, there's always that element of fear, isn't there? When you develop your people too much, or if you give them too much information and things like that. And I see a lot of that come through when I'm working with coaching clients, and they're always wondering, like, where is that fine line? How much do I develop my people? How much information do I give them? And what's your view around that?
Oh, that's a really good one. And it links into two things, really. What if I develop them and then they leave? And what if I develop them and they know more than me? So if I go to that first one, what if I develop them and then they leave? I think, and I might be misquoting, I think it's a Richard Branson quote when he talks about the fact that, well, you could develop them and then they leave, or you could not develop them and then they stay. And isn't that an interesting thing? What would you rather have? Would you rather have confident, capable people who can take on more of the workload, who can smash it out of the park? Or would you rather have people who are solely reliant on you, and you have all of that on your shoulders, where you're having to try and fix things, solve things. And the more that you feel like your team aren't competent and capable, the more you feel like it's on your shoulders. So first of all, it's a natural progression that people might leave. So you do have to anticipate that if you develop people, they may well leave, but also they may well love doing what they're doing and working with you so much that they stay and they make your life so much easier. And they also might leave and then come back in another guise, in another capacity. Yes, there always is that danger that they might leave, but I think it's far worse if you don't develop them and they stay. And then they're not performing and they're not engaged and all the rest of it. And that other point was around, if you develop them and then they know more than you, I would really encourage people to just reframe that a little bit, because if we're allowing our ego to get in the way and we're trying to keep people small because of our own egos, you're not doing yourself any favors really, and you're certainly not doing other people any favors. So I wonder if you could just flip it around a bit and reframe it and think, wouldn't it be amazing if I have a team of people who do know more than me? Because A, they could inspire me more to grow and develop in different ways, and B, isn't that what we're aiming for as leaders, to create people in our teams who are very capable of holding the fort? It means you can go on holiday and you can switch off. It means you can have your weekends and your evenings free. It frees up more of your time to do other important stuff, like building your connections across the business or developing yourself in a different way. So I think what I'd really like people to take away is, if they've got some of these barriers like time or anything else, is just think about how they could reframe it a little bit and think a little bit differently.
I love that element of if somebody can do your job better than you. And it was reminding me of, I remember years ago recruiting somebody, and the words I said when I recruited her was, in 6 months, she'll be able to do my job better than I can. And I'd said this to a former colleague, and she looked at me and was like, I don't think so. And I was like, no, she will. And that for me was the absolute best thing. And years later, funnily enough, I was in touch with her yesterday. She's currently in the process of applying for a new role. And the stuff that she's gone on to do in the time since we worked together is absolutely phenomenal. And she is incredible. And that made my life so much easier. So as a manager, knowing that I had somebody on my team that could deputize for me, that could step up, that would take the initiative, that would do things that I maybe not in the same way that I would do them, but do things to the same standard that I would do them. The pressure that took off my shoulders was immense. So yeah, absolutely second that. So are there any other barriers then that you see come up for people?
Oh, yes. Okay. So first one is thinking about what takes priority for people's development, because let me just talk about the performance development plan, right? So most people in organizations, they have some form of personal development plan. What I used to see an awful lot was, oh my God, it's that time of year, got to fill out a performance development plan. You get out your paperwork and it's a bit of a tick box exercise. Like, what do we put on the plan to keep the learning and development team or the HR team happy? And it's really not about that. So a couple of tips, first of all, about how you might prioritize and what you might put on the plan. My biggest advice is don't go for more than three things maximum. It's much better to do one or two things, three max, really well, that makes a difference, that makes progress for people, than to have this shopping list. Because you know what it's like, as soon as you have a shopping list of something, it just becomes overwhelming for everybody. And rather than filling up a personal development plan with just loads of little bits and pieces, chunk it up a little bit, make it a little bit juicy, and then think about all of the different development options that might be available to help somebody to progress towards that. What I normally share with managers is, maybe as a priority, think about what do they need right now to be competent in their role. So if they're not fully competent, what are the one or maybe two things that could really help them to get that level of competence that you need them to have for right now? and then start getting a little bit juicy, because that on its own might be a little bit dull for people. So it's almost like a next layer. And the next layer might be, what are their strengths that they could build on, or any particular watch outs like blind spots. So something that might really hold them back in their career. So an example of that might be if somebody's in a very technical role and they would love to become a manager in the future, maybe one of their watch outs is that they get head down, they get deep into the technical stuff, and they forget to communicate with people. They forget to have conversations and build relationships. So that might really hold them back from becoming a manager in the future if they've got that technical proficiency, but they've not yet learned how to engage with people, inspire them, motivate them. And the kind of third level is thinking about the stretch and challenge for people. And the amount of stretch and challenge that people might want would look very different, because there are some people who are always going to want to just come in, do their job and go home. And so stretch and challenge for someone like that might be creating a new process or speeding up a system, whereas stretch and challenge for somebody that's got really big ambitions about having a much more senior role in future, their stretch and challenge might look entirely different. It might be leading a huge project, or it might be really stepping outside of their comfort zone and doing something that's very different. And that's why it's important to use your one-to-ones. If you don't have specific development conversations, use your one-to-ones to really understand what kind of career aspirations do your people have. Are they really quite happy to come in, do their job, go home? Do they want a broader, richer experience? Do they want to adventure around and use their skill set in different areas of the business? Or do they really want to think about how they could have more impact? So the stretch and challenge would look really different.
Yeah, and it's an interesting point as well, because I remember when I was fairly early in my senior management career, that we went to a meeting. The theme of the meeting was development and how we can develop and motivate our people. And the conversation turned to, we've got some people that are not ambitious, some people that don't want to go anywhere. They've got no kind of career aspirations, and they're just going to stay in that job for the next 10 years or whatever. And it was like, what do we do with these people? And I was like, what do you want to do with them? Because at that point I was still learning, and I was thinking maybe they're going to come up with some new ways to motivate them or something like that. And it was almost, maybe we might even manage them out because they're not ambitious and they're not growing with the business. And I was like, oh, I'm sure that's not what you do as a leader or a manager. And that was my first insight into kind of what could I actually do to help motivate these people, because not everybody wants to be a leader or a manager. Not everybody wants to climb the ranks. Sometimes people will get into a management role and be happy to stay where they are. And I know when I was looking after a team of management level people, it was very much, there was a couple of them that did definitely want to progress. So we created a plan to do that. And the others that were just quite happy earning what they were earning, doing the jobs that they were doing, it was like, what else can you do? What else would you like to do? Some of them didn't want to do anything else. They were really happy and really motivated, but it was just that check-in. And then with the others, it was very much about what projects could they get involved in and things like that. And all of a sudden, obviously it takes a while, doesn't it, to get to know people, but that team became a really strong team. Everybody was motivated in different ways and it was respected. That was their kind of form of motivation and what they enjoyed doing. And I think what I learned from that is everybody is individual, aren't they? And as a leader, it's your job to understand those individuals. And like you said, what makes them tick, but also what motivates them.
Exactly. And let's face it, if we're asking those kind of questions, if we're getting to know our team members, it also validates that as a career choice. It is perfectly okay to stay where you are. What you can't do, though, is not develop at all. Because if you think about the pace of change nowadays, if you do no development whatsoever, is your role going to be secure in maybe 3 years, 4 years, 5 years time? It's just a different kind of development. So your development might just be keeping up to speed with new technology, new processes, which is very different. But let's face it, we need people in any organization. We need people who want to come in and do their job and go home. This is what gives the organization stability, because if everybody wanted to progress and grow and develop and they were all highly ambitious, you're going to have a problem because there's only going to be a limited amount of opportunity. But I think you're spot on when you're talking about what motivates them. If you disregard people who want to come and do their job, go home, you're missing such a valuable opportunity, because you want to keep that stability. But for most people, if you do it exactly the same all of the time, it just doesn't give you that personal sense of fulfillment. So I don't know if either of you are familiar with the book, The Progress Principle by Teresa Amibile and Stephen Kramer. Talks about how motivating it is for people to focus on the progress that they've made. According to their research, it was one of the most motivational things if you're making progress. So that opportunity to chat with somebody in your team and to say, over this last 6 months, look at all of these things that you've done. Look at how you've developed. Look at how you've strengthened your confidence, built your skill set in this. It's so motivational. And I'm going to keep banging the drum about the motivation factor. So Dan Pink talks about intrinsic motivation. So the kinds of things that get us doing stuff willingly. And the 3 key areas he focused on was 1, having autonomy and choice, 2, mastery, which is all about development, and 3 was having a sense of purpose. So as a leader, if you can give people choice, if you can help them understand why they're doing what they're doing, and then help them develop alongside, that really is the key to keep people motivated and engaged.
Yeah, I love Dan Pink's work, and I haven't come across the Progress Principle, but that very much aligns with some of the stuff that Pam and I talk about quite regularly, of the importance of noticing strengths and progress. And that is so powerful, and it's so underutilized, I think, as a tool by managers. So I know you've got one more barrier, and then we're going to look at some of the practical solutions that people can start to think about if they are struggling with any of these barriers. So what's the final barrier that you're going to share with us?
The final barrier, and I know a little bit about this as well, Jackie. The final barrier is that managers often say, I don't know how to develop people. So when I was just talking about performance development plans, the other thing that I see is a PDP littered with, go on this course, go on that course. And it grinds my gears, right? So let's think outside of work. If you needed to learn how to retile a bathroom, what would you do? So Pam, what would you do if you had to learn how to retile a bathroom? How would you learn?
So that's a good question, because I've done that, and I actually went onto YouTube and watched
and
a loads of tutorials.
Yeah, absolutely. And Jackie, what about you?
Do you know what? I'm more of that view of I'd probably start off by giving it a go and then get stuck and then go to YouTube for the bit I got stuck with.
All righty. So here's what I noticed. Outside of work, people will do stuff like Google, YouTube, ChatGPT. They'll ask somebody, they'll watch somebody, they'll give it a go. And then the second you get inside any organization, all of a sudden it defaults to go on a course, go on a course. And you're like, isn't that interesting? Outside work, would you have ever thought I would go on a course to learn how to retile my bathroom? Oh, would you?
Do you know, it is true, but I think just as you said that, then what kind of came up for me there was that in work, I think sometimes there's that real fear of making a mistake and not getting it right. So to try and to make a mistake could result in getting it wrong. And I think sometimes, especially for new leaders and managers, that can be a real fear factor. And then as you develop through your career, it might get a bit easier, but still, you've still got that constant thought of, I'm a manager or leader, I need to be seen to do everything right, I need to learn it. And then I think there's a lot less of that, we'll just give it a try and see what happens, because of that fear factor.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. A lot of people come on my leadership development programs, even if they've been leaders for 20 years, because they almost want validation that what they're doing is right, the stuff that they're doing instinctively. So when we're thinking about how we can develop, so if managers think, I don't know how to develop my team, I just encourage them to think about EPIC development. And EPIC stands for experiences, people, information, and courses. And you'll see that courses is last, very deliberately. Because what I also know is that the way people generally tend to learn best and most is through experience. So Pam, when you were saying there about trial and error, making mistakes, although people might not want to make the mistakes, it's how we often learn best. And often, if you think about the impact of learning experiences through a manager's career, it's often having the experience and doing things wrong and realizing what happens and thinking about how to do it differently next time round. It's often that kind of stuff where the biggest shifts happen. I think experiences first. What experiences can you give people? If somebody in your team needs to brush up their presentation skills, instead of go on a course, you could maybe say, have an experience. And that could be, give a presentation at the next team meeting. Because believe me, if you're doing it in a safe space, but if you're trying to step out of your comfort zone, do something new, you're going to really focus on learning the skills, because you're not going to perhaps want to look daft in front of your colleagues. So I think experiences first, then people. How can you learn through different people? And that could be coaching, mentoring, feedback. It could be shadowing somebody who's an expert and watching them in action. So again, coming back to that example of presentation skills, perhaps picking somebody who you know presents really well, watching them in action, and then asking them some questions afterwards. Information could be books, it could be podcasts, it could be articles. So that's really about going online, maybe seeking out some information that might help. So for presentation skills, it might be look at a list of 10 tips to improve your presentation skills. And then courses, there's always going to be courses that could help you on pretty much anything. So you could go on a presentation skills course. But what I'd encourage managers to do before they think about courses for people is to think about all of the other stuff that they could do to develop. So that way, on your PDP, you could just have this one thing, presentation skills, and you can have a whole raft of things that could help people to develop and to make progress.
I love the EPIC framework, and it's one that I've shared because I first learned that from you. So is that your own framework that you've created?
Yeah.
It's absolute genius, and I have shared that. So now at least I know that I'm attributing it correctly, because it just makes it so straightforward for people to be a bit more creative about the different ways. And I love the emphasis on courses being last, and that illustration of how would you go about tiling your bathroom is just a great one, I think, for people to be able to apply for themselves and developing others. So before we wrap up, what other you shared huge numbers already of really practical tips and insights that people can take on board. What would be some of your key points that you would want leaders and managers listening to take away if they're going to improve their ability to develop others?
Alrighty. I want to stick something in before the tips, actually, and that's just thinking about the joy of developing others, JODO, because it struck me the other day. I was training some managers on becoming mentors across the business. And one of the first questions I asked them is, why did you sign up to this program? And this one guy just looked at me and went, why wouldn't I? Because the satisfaction that you can get from it's not just the immediate benefits that you're seeing yourself in the team, but creating a legacy, because you will have such an impact on people's lives when you're developing them, when you're interested in them. And that really lights up a spark for so many people. And Pam, when you were saying about it earlier, how you felt when you had that impact on people, you impact on your team, it's just going to last forever. It's going to be something that they always remember. And Jackie, when you were saying about your team member who then went on to achieve these amazing things, isn't it a great feeling to have? So yeah, before I go on to the tips, just wanted to talk about JODO and the spark that you have. So one tip that I can suggest is just role model development yourself. So I see a lot of managers when they step into their role for the first time, thinking that they can't be vulnerable at all. They can't show any weakness. They have to have it all together. They have to know what they're doing. So actually demonstrating to your team, I'm still learning. This is what I'm focused on developing at the moment, sharing what it is that you're learning and how you're learning it and what difference it makes. It inspires people. So you're always on the stage, really, as a manager. People are looking to you for cues and ideas and tips about how to behave. So if you're role modeling, developing yourself, it opens the door. It really encourages people to do the same. Second one would be to ask for feedback, but don't use the word feedback. So ask for tips. So imagine that you've just been running a team meeting. You could chat to somebody afterwards and say, oh, Sarah, I would love just to have a couple of tips from you about how we could run the meeting a little bit differently. And so that way, what you're demonstrating is that you're open to feedback, you're open to taking on board ideas and suggestions. So it gets your team thinking as well, especially if they know that you're likely to ask lots of these kinds of questions. But I think more importantly, it opens the door for you to be able to give feedback to your team. So once you've role modeled and demonstrated that they can tell you these things and you're going to try and adapt and change, then it gives you more permission to give people feedback, which obviously is another way to develop them, right? And 2 more tips. One is sharing what strengths you see in them. So I talked earlier about developing your strengths being a really powerful motivator. Often, one of the problems is people don't see their own strengths because it's something that they do all of the time. It's something that comes naturally to them. And I remember the first time a manager said to me, you've got such a strength in building relationships with people. And I just remember looking at him thinking, what do you mean? I'm just talking to people. This is what everybody does. And he was like, no, not everybody does that. So he was giving me real specifics. This is what you do. This is what I've seen you do. This is the impact that I've seen it create. And I think you could do it even more in this situation. So really helping me to understand where he saw my strengths helped me to start thinking about them as strengths and start developing them more. Because if we focus on developing our strengths, we go further and we go faster than trying to always plug gaps. And the last tip is around being specific, because I see a lot of managers say things like throwaway lines like, you need to be more commercial, you need to have more impact, you need to be more strategic. And I'm like, what does that even mean? Because it could mean so many different things to different people. So trying to be really granular, like the example that I just gave. What did you see? What was the impact? What were the consequences? Because just say for them, like being more commercial, somebody might understand that as, well, I need to be able to read balance sheets. I need to think about profit and loss. And actually, you as a manager might just mean, can you just understand how the business makes money? Because some of the decisions you're making are probably not as commercially minded as they could be. So, yeah, a few final tips to leave you with.
That's brilliant. I'm just sitting here listening to those tips thinking, I wish that we worked together back when I was in my corporate career, because I was always looking for what's the next thing that we can do. And I was always getting told to calm down. We don't need to do that. This is how we do things. And just listening to you today, I'm like, wow, you've really inspired me. And I'm even thinking, did I make the wrong thing? Did I make the wrong choice coming out of corporate? Maybe I should go back and manage those teams again. But I really enjoyed listening to your tips. And it's been great just hearing your perspective on things as well.
So, Katy, you've just shared, as we knew you would, incredible value during the course of this podcast. For people that are listening and that want to get in touch with you, follow your content, maybe come to you for support for their teams or organizations, how can people find you and get in touch?
Okay, I think 2 key ways. First of all, LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn pretty regularly. Get in touch, connect. Very happy to connect in and chat all things development. And secondly, hop over to my website. It's makerealprogress.co.uk, but I'm pretty sure you'll have that in the show notes.
Yep, we will put the links in the show notes. And yeah, I cannot emphasize enough how valuable it will be if you go and give Katy a follow. The stuff you share is incredible. I've just loved getting to know more about you over the last few years and share some of the content. And as I say, the EPIC framework for me has been one that I have shared with pride on many an occasion since I first heard it from you. So thank you as ever for listening. If this episode has been helpful, or if you know somebody that is perhaps finding it challenging or needs some simple ways to be able to develop others more effectively, then please do share this episode with them. And as ever, please do rate and review on whatever podcast platform you are listening to us on. And we'll be back next week with another episode.
Exciting news from us. If you're an ambitious leader or manager earning 50k or more and you're ready to take your career to the next level, we have an opportunity for you. Introducing Catalyst Career Club, your secret weapon for unlocking career success. As a member, you'll get access to monthly live training sessions, exclusive job opportunities, and the ability to get personalised advice from us on your toughest career challenges.
We've helped thousands of driven leaders like you secure significant pay rises, land dream roles and thrive in their careers. And now we want to support you in achieving your most ambitious career goals too. Membership is just $6.99 per month with no contract or tie-in. And as a special bonus for being our podcast listeners, you can use the code podcast at checkout to get your first month for just £1. Head over to pamelalangan.com/Catalyst Career Club to sign up now, and we'll see you inside.